Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Daps, back with another Kamihime project video. This one is going to cover a weapon guide for new or returning players. Even some players that are veterans can look at it, because it has a whole bunch of different stuff that they might be interested in as well. But it was done by a person that goes by the name of Paragon, and he's been going around throughout the community. He got some info from me, he got some info from other veterans, he got some info from the wikis and all that. Compiled this guide and basically ended up just making a huge guide for people to look at. It's a very good guide. I suggest you guys look at it as well. I will link it in the description to this video. Check that out if you're curious. Also, I'm not going to cover everything in this guide, but I will give a bit of a condensed version of it as well. Because a lot of these mechanics I've also learned as well, and honestly, if you're a veteran or planning on getting better in the game, you'll probably learn a lot of this as well. But I won't cover some things like glossary as well, because there is one here, because there's way too many terms in this game that are abbreviated and whatnot. If you're curious about anything that's said, go to that glossary on your own time, because it would easily double, maybe even triple the video length. Now, starting off with this intro, he made this guide because there's a vast number of weapons in the game. It could easily be bewildering to people that either returned or just brand new. Sometimes it's a little bit bewildering to even veterans, because you might find something new that pops up. JP Sad has recently introduced another weapon skill, for instance, and we had to go finding out what it does and how useful it is. So it kind of depends. But basically, this is to make it a little bit easier to understand at the very least. And it focuses mostly on free-to-play weapons, because of course there's gacha weapons. It is a gacha game. You can spend money on it, but you don't have to. The free weapons do a very, very, very good job at clearing practically anything in the game. It's more reliant on the hime you pull than the weapons, because you can always go grind weapons. So, that said, it really must be pointed out that this does focus on free-to-play weapons, even though it does have some of the gacha weapons as well. But it's generally going to help you out trying to build a grid to get stronger. Weapons carry you a lot in this game. That said, SR and the lower weapons are not going to be covered, because they're not useful for anything beyond the earliest stages in the game. I agree with this fully, because once you're able to get SSR weapons, SR has no point on the grid, period. And that can kind of even carry over to characters too, because not too many SR or R characters are even useful in the game anymore. So, that said, once you're at the point where you can grind SSR weapons, the general point that will easily shut down all SR weapons is Epic Quest once you can unlock it. Once you get to that point, you don't need SR, because they don't level up as much. They don't have better access to weapon skills. The base stats are lower. Just stop using SR weapons once you're able to frequently get SSR. And you can even stop that as early as, like, say, the ultimate raids, because you can start getting a decent amount of weapons just from those. A day one player can hit a point where you don't need SR weapons, trust me on that. And power creep is definitely a thing in the game, because it's not just weapons. Like, a lot of different stuff from older years have been more or less superseded by the newer stuff. There are some things that can be useful from old years, even the first year of the game, but it's not that often. So this is updated to stay relevant and all that. And then he gives his credit to different members and all that as well, right here. But there you go. But what weapons should you get? It greatly can vary, depending on the situation, depending on the characters. It all depends. You just have to have a general idea of which ones to try and aim for which situation. Like, for starters, before even getting to rank 120, the assault weapons are very, very good. They up the attack power of what you're doing, aka you deal more damage. Self-explanatory. And they work for any sort of setup. So that's something to know. You may get the Phantom weapons for the Ragnarok raids depending on your grid, but these need to start paying attention to weapon types, and you can do without them, honestly. This is why they're said to be optional right here. You could do without them, but if you can use them, they kind of do help. But they do fall off later, so you won't use them forever. Same case with the small Exceed weapons from the Raid Metal Shop. You can get those as well if you want to do some more on burst damage. You can get the large version, but that's from raid events, like the Union raid events. We call those UE, but they will have a stronger Exceed weapon if you really want to. It depends on the timing of the event, mainly, but they're also very good for bursting. Same time, rank 90, you start getting access to Guardian raids, and they can also have some pretty solid weapon skills, especially for some cases where it's like you may not access a certain weapon skill until later down the line, or it's just harder to get for the time being. So they make some very good temporary weapons, so you can get those. You don't need to final break them, but you can. And final breaking is really just upping its skill levels, because they don't get that much of a boost if you final break it. But I do have to point out that there is a point for the global side. They will have easier weapons to final break from Guardian raids. The Japanese side has already gotten that, though. And they've even got some new types of Guardian weapons as well to also help you out a little bit more. So, that said, you could final break them. You don't have to, though, because you're not too far off from the point where the next part is, where it says these Zodiac weapons. And once you hit the ranks in order to start doing Guardian Plus raids, that's when you can start seeing the purple medals from the raids, and these are very good for the Zodiac Vigor, the Zodiac Elaborate, and the Zodiac Rebellion. Rebellion isn't mentioned here because of the fact that not too many people get a team that can actually run with low HP. That's what Rebellion does. Vigor instead runs off a high HP, so if you're trying to keep your HP high, you can really make the most out of Vigor. But if you feel like you can't do that, then Rebellion is the replacement for Vigor. Just get one or the other, don't get both. Zodiac Elaborate's for ability damage teams. If you want to generalize your grid, you'll probably get one or two of these. But if you have an ability damage team, you'll probably get more than two. So that's something to keep in mind. Once you hit the rank 130, you can start getting Zodiac weapons maxed out, because you'll start doing malicious raids. They come with their own new set of weapons, and you get the materials to final break 2 or ultimate limit break. I'll go over that in a second. But the thing is, though, these malicious weapons that you can also get, they can give you some ascension to help with your healing, or give you technical in order to help with the normal attack damage. But the technical is more used for getting more max HP, because HP is actually pretty important in this game, depending on your team. Because if you have a really tanky team, you may not have to worry about HP too much. But most cases you won't, and you want to make sure you can survive the fights, because harder fights can easily nuke you off the face of the earth. So more HP helps you survive, obviously. They also affect Vigor and Rebellion too, so it makes it easier to maintain the intervals for those as well. Now, rank 150, or whenever the malicious plus raids are available, because that will change later down the line. But the malicious plus raids, they can give you technical plus and exceed plus. What those do is give a flat damage increase to either normal attacks or burst, but they only work with elemental advantage. Depends on your needs of your grid. These will usually be the last weapons you toss on the grid. But the thing is, though, they are there. They can help. It still depends on what you got. Now, the general considerations. When it comes to weapon skills, they have multiple different skill sizes, and that really does affect how much they give. Like, for instance, a large weapon skill will definitely give more than a medium. A medium gives more than a small. There's some in there called extra large and maximum. And what that is like extra large is like the 4th size, and maximum is like the 5th size. There's not too many that have maximum, so it's rare. You may find some extra large ones, but they tend to be from either specific things like Union Event or specific Dragonic Eye trades, or you'll probably find it just out of sheer luck by pulling the right character. So, extra large is in the game, but it's not that often. And it's not for every weapon skill. What this guide, I don't see it mentioned right here, but it may mention it later. But what this guide doesn't necessarily cover at this point, there are plus sizes to each one, as in you'll see it in the weapon skills description where it says small. Like, if it's small, it'll have 1 plus. If it's medium, it has 2. If it's large, it has 3. If it's extra large, it has 4. If it's maximal, it should have 5. But I'm not sure if they did it that way. But the plus on the weapon skills determines how the size is. Like, it says Glaciate, and it has 4 pluses. That means extra large. And the name Glaciate is important for this next part because it means water. So it literally means extra large water. So if you are paying attention to different weapon skills and all that, you'll notice that some of these names repeat. So it might say Inferno, it might say Glaciate, it might say Luminous, it might say Impulse. It's all based on the element and the skill size where you get that from. So that's an interesting little note right there. Now, base stats. This is a little bit interesting because of the fact that base stats, there's only 2 times where base stats really could make a difference. The really early game, you can brute force a lot of the fights with just base stats. You don't even honestly need to pay attention to weapon skills until you start getting into ultimate raids. But, again, base stats, they are there. Everything runs off of base stats. Because Defender runs off of base HP, of course, and the other weapon skills that are like damage oriented, like Assault, like Vigor, I mentioned Rebellion, even ones like Exceed, they all trace back to base attack, because that will up the damage multipliers right there as well. This is info for anybody that wants to min-max, as in try to absolutely maximize everything on there, but that takes a lot of time and effort. And you can't always do it anyways, because, again, it's heavily dependent on trying to maximize base stats along with everything else. So this is something you can kind of ignore. But an interesting little note is that if a character likes the weapon type, like for instance if it's a staff, or if it's a sword, or if it's a bow, then they will get a 20% bonus increase in base stats from that weapon. So, for example, if they like the weapon and it gets 1,000 attack, they now get 1,200 attack from that weapon. Again, interesting little note. You don't have to pay attention to it, but when it comes to the earliest points of the game, bigger numbers can carry you up until you start getting to some of the more harder content, like the ultimate raids. But only the min-maxers will truly care about this. So, there's that. Now, limit breaks. Anybody that's a veteran already has a good idea of it. The newer players, though. The limit breaks is a star count on the weapons. And also you have star counts for, like, characters, Eidolons, and all that stuff, too. But, generally, when it comes to weapons, 3rd star is considered MLB or max limit break. 4th star is called FLB or final limit break. And 5th star, the official name in the game is called Final Limit Break 2. But we as a community have named it Ultra Limit Break or ULB because it's just easier to deal with. It differentiates it a little bit. But the higher the star count, the higher the max level, and the higher the weapon skills can go. So keep that in mind. And that in turn also means you get more base stats as well. Base stats for Ultimate Limit Break are actually really, really good. So that's something to know. But generally when you're getting weapons to like Final Break or especially Ultimate Limit Break, they're the weapon skills that you really want to have on your grid. So that's something to know. When you want to limit break a weapon, you need multiple copies of it up until the 3rd star. Once you hit 3 stars, you start needing different stuff. Now, at any point, you can use something called a weapon brick, as we nickname it, but the official name is Holy Steel Argentum. These SSR break limit materials are purple, and they really do look like a brick, but they are extremely valuable, so be very careful on what you're going to use it on. Generally, you do not want to use it on anything that is easy to grind, or on stuff where you can grind out materials and get it. Like, there is some thought into using it to, like, say, jump from final limit break to ultimate, just to, like, skip a grind for a lot of materials, and those soul weapons are really grindy. If you can help it, just avoid doing that. But if you know you can get a lot of those, then maybe. But my suggestion to you is just to use them on stuff that is hard to get, like the character weapons that you get from the Gacha. Some of the Dragonic Eye weapons are a very good candidate for that as well, because Dragonic Eyes, they're kind of easy to come by, but it can take longer than you think. So, that said, they're good candidates for that. But if it's something like a raid weapon, don't try it. Now, as for when you try to go from 3rd star onward, you start needing materials that you can get from other stuff. Like, you might need the books, you might need raid materials, or Eidolon is always needed. When it comes to 4th to 5th star, you also need the discs from malicious raids, and you might even need malicious plus, like for the soul weapons. But these are all materials you can grind out. You don't need any more copies of the weapon. So that's something to know. And generally, as I said right here, you can probably just have a whole bunch of placeholders until you reach the higher ranks. So there's that. Another thing that also plays a huge factor when it comes to the weapon skills, Eidolon effects. Because we have multiple different Eidolon effects in the game where they will say they affect different weapon skills. The more common ones are the Guardian Eidolons, the ones that you get from the raids that you grind out, and the Catastrophe Eidolons that you may pull from the Gacha. You might even pull the 1st generation of the Malicious series Eidolons. They also can affect weapon skills. You might pull an Eidolon that just focuses on Defender. They also can affect the Defender, just not any other weapon skills. These are flat multipliers to your weapon skills, and they stack. In the example that's given here, you can have like a Guardian for your main and choose somebody's Catastrophe for support, and this will give you a 1.9 times boost in your weapon skills, meaning they are almost doubled. So if a weapon had, say, 20% assault that it was giving, it's suddenly almost 40% just from that. And again, these will stack. So if you happen to have practically the best of all of it, from what I can give for an example, you can take your own Catastrophe Eidolon, take a friend's Catastrophe Eidolon. Those will be your main and friend Eidolons. You can have a Malicious Generation 1 in your sub slots, and just for Defender, you can have that Eidolon as well. That means all the weapon skills in your grid just got a 2.25 times boost, but the Defender got a 2.4 times. So, there you go. These are very powerful, as you can see, because it can really help you out. And then it also makes you need less of something, because they even give an example here where if you happen to have a Catastrophe Eidolon, because you can pick your own as well, and then you have the Malicious Generation 1, then the total amount of Vigorous you would need in your grid would be 44.5%, because all that's just going to multiply and stack it to the upper limit of 100%. But there's a whole bunch of different weapon skill caps in the appendix as well. I'm not going to cover that, because generally that's a whole laundry list of different things, and how they work is just, there's a lot of different interactions with that. That would be a whole nother video entirely if I ever do that. Now then, getting into some stuff that's notable. I keep mentioning it. The ultimate raid weapons, any veteran will tell you, get these weapons. Other ones are on par with this from the Epic Quest, and then the event weapons like Advent Battle or Raid Event. They will generally be able to FLB, but not ULB. But they are still very good for what they do, because the vast majority of them will have either Assault as their large or Defender as their large. And in the case of Ultimate Rage, you can have Elaborate as the large too, which is an ability damage one. Get what you need of these, but generally a lot of people will load up on the large Assault in the early game. But also remember that the Elaborate ones are good for ability damage teams, because you may want to keep some of these even after you're on a higher point, because until you transition to the Zodiac Elaborates, these will be your placeholders, the Ultimate Raid Elaborates. But the Assault and Defender are just more or less stopgap until you get better stuff, but they are still good at what they do. And honestly, with some setups for these Ultimate Raid weapons, you may or may not even need the Phantom weapons, which are also covered, or the Guardian weapons too. It depends on your setup. It really does. This game makes you experiment, so you have to do that. But yes, they also mentioned the Epic Quest ones and Advent Battle Raid Event. These ones tend to have one large and one medium, so they're actually a little bit better than the Ultimate Raid ones, so keep an eye out for those. Now, as for the Guild Order weapons, there's something you do called Guild Order if you want to get more Ori Child-Con to upgrade your other weapons. These Guild Order weapons, they're horrible. They are very, very horrible. It takes a while to get 4 copies. They have weapon skills that ain't even all that great. They don't final break. Don't worry about them. Guild Order weapons, do not worry about them. They are just fodder to use to upgrade other stuff. You can even dismantle weapons in order to get materials in order to help out with some later things. The Guild Order weapons are basically dismantle fodder. Now, the Phantom weapons we mentioned, when you get to the Ragnarok Catastrophe raids, and I say Ragnarok Catastrophe because they are the next raid tier above Ultimate. But when you get to those raids, these weapons, you'll get one to randomly drop each time you clear the raid. But these are the ones that need you to pay attention to weapon type, because one skill will affect all weapons of the same type, and the other skill only goes off if you have 6 of the same type on the grid, including the weapon itself. So for example, right here you see a Phantom Axe. That means it will boost the base stats of all axes on the grid, but the second skill needs 5 other axes on the grid as well. These can help you, but not for long. This is also another temporary weapon. But generally a lot of people also still end up using these as materials for other stuff too, because when you go back and clear the raids that drop the Phantom weapons, you'll still be able to like dismantle these and get some extra materials. So remember that. Now then, from Raid Metal Shop, you might find some of these things as well, and then on top of that too, a few weapons like the Assault and the Defender XL series weapons, they can come from Union events. But a lot of these are old Union event weapons where you can trade for the red raid medals, not the purple. You can kind of get some exceeds here if you want. You might get some other stats that you may or may not need. Like, for example, it says that the XL isn't that useful. However, for early on they can be. It's just the fact that you're not going to have as much HP. So it is a little bit of a risk. So if you find yourself needing more HP in a fight, you can ignore the XL series of weapons. But when it comes to basically the Exceed ones, you probably will use them for a while, at least until you can get the large versions. Soul weapons, these are very important because these are weapons that you will need constantly. When you unlock more souls, you need A-class weapons to turn into S-class weapons. Then you will need the S-class souls that you have unlocked from S1 in order to unlock other souls down the line. So you will need these weapons one way or another. It doesn't matter, you will need them. Whether or not you use them on the grid, however, depends. Because A-class souls do become better with these weapons equipped. S-class and above will really benefit from it when you can ultimate limit break their weapons. So that's something to know. However, the S-class souls take a lot, and I do mean a lot, of materials to unlock, including the S1 souls needing the A-class weapons. So to get an S1, you need the A-class soul weapon that corresponds. The general thing about these, though, is that the soul weapons will have one main skill for the first skill, and it is to either boost elemental attack, not assault. It is one of the only cases where you can boost elemental attack from the weapon. Or you can get the defender one, which is HP based. These are not affected by Eidolon effects, by the way. And neither is the Phantom weapons too, I forgot to mention that. But the soul weapons, they are very, very good, and they just grow even better if you happen to get them the ultimate limit break. So consider what you really want most out of it. There are some very rare cases where the HP one can actually be used. However, most part, the safest bet is just to get the elemental one. If you're trying to unlock every soul in the game, you will get at least every single A-class weapon at least once, except for like maybe the HP ones, because you may not need to get the HP ones. So you'll get one for each A-class soul, period. That's the general thing. Now the Union event, I mentioned these because this is some of the stuff that you can get. There are in the Union Metal shop, but I would suggest not trading for them in the Union Metal shop, because you might need the Union Metals for other stuff, including the so-called break limit items as well. Those purple bricks I mentioned, they are in the Union shop. But there are Exceed weapons shown here. These like 6 right here, I'll even like highlight it a little bit. Like you can see it right there. They may randomly drop from Seraph battles. I don't know if they drop from the Demon ones as well. I could be wrong. But these are your large Exceeds that you will use as a free player. You can get them from the rewards from Union events as well. You can overgrind those events if you want to try and get some extra. These are weapons that you will use for your burst teams if you are a free player. So keep that in mind. Excuse me. And it even mentions that they are superseded by the Versa weapons, but honestly, you still might want these even if you have versatility weapons. It depends on what you get. It really does, because the main thing with burst teams is the fact that they really want to try and up that burst multiplier as well as a soft cap if you can. And these kind of do that for both aspects. So that said, it may be worth holding on to 1 or 2 of these regardless, unless you have some really ultra specific setup that usually needs you to get Gacha weapons. But unless you have one of those ultra specific setups, you probably will have at least 1 or 2 of these that you just have on standby, even if you have like the versatility that's mentioned. And trust me, we'll get to that one. The Pride series weapons, however, these are not good. They can be decent on earlier grids, but they are not good. Because what they do is give a flat amount of assault, and you get even more assault as your HP drops. If you somehow have a rebellion weapon, these might pair pretty well with them, but it's very, very niche, and you really don't need to worry about it. Now, if it does happen to have something like Exceed with it, then maybe you might end up using it. I remember this little green sword right here did have Exceed, and I think this gun did too. So, you may use them for something just to like have a stopgap moment. But when you get better Exceed weapons, you're like, the ones up here, then you're probably just going to get rid of all of these, period. And I mentioned the Defender XL. It says not useful and best avoided. There is one exception, and that's if your HP is really low, because these do give a lot of max HP. It's like 30% per weapon. So that's the only time you can probably have maybe one of them, but you're probably going to get rid of them anyway. So there is a niche use for it, but you probably aren't going to. Now then, when it comes to these, which is the Guardian Raid weapons, depending on the Guardian Raid, there's different ones. And like I said too, JP Sad has gotten more of these, so they actually will have like additional ones. They do mention when the costs are reduced as well, which is October. This video is getting posted in August, so that's just how far ahead I am on like posting this video compared to when we'll get the update. So that said, each Guardian raid, and they are called Ragnarok, but we literally say Guardian because it has Guardian in the title. But these are some strong free-to-play weapons up until you start getting the ultimate limit break ones. So you may end up getting them. I know for fire, they do have a very good niche with their Vigor one. So you may even have that for free-to-play ability damage on fire. Some of these also come with something called Exceed, which is the burst thing. Some of these come with something called Sting, which is Stinger. Stinger is pretty good if you have elemental advantage, if it goes off. It has a chance of activation per weapon. If it doesn't activate, you're not getting it. And if you're doing something like, say, Dark Stinger against a fire enemy, you will never see it go off because it only works with elemental advantage. So, that said, the Stinger ones kind of have a niche use, but it depends on if you want to gamble with random numbers, like random number generator. Because when it comes to Stinger, you generally want the large Stinger and you want it to go to ultimate limit break. But these can help from here. My general suggestion, though, is the fact that most of these are going to have a Vigor weapon somewhere. You'll probably get your earliest Vigor from here. Dark's is the only one left out on that. But you might get some Ascension, you might get some other stuff. You never know. It all depends on what you're going after, what your uses are. So, that's something to remember. Now, they all look like this, basically. And depending on which one, it determines the weapon skills and whatnot, too. Like, for example, the two swords right here that I kind of highlighted a little bit. I don't know if you can see that on screen. They're the ones that have the medium Stinger. And for those two elements, it could help, but it's still random RNG. You may or may not want to use them. It's all up to you. But there's a lot of different weapons here. And generally, you will get some key ones. Like this one for water that looks like a double-bladed lance, and that gun for thunder. Very, very good. But again, these are temporary. The only one that may not be temporary for a free-to-play grid, again, is the fire one that has Vigor and Elaborate, because it kind of does stack pretty well with the Zodiac Elaborate, ironically. There has been some grid setups where you've used like a few of the fire Vigor. I think it's like 3 or 4 of them, and then you just load up with Zodiac Elaborate, and then you're just nuking a lot of ability damage as a free player. Because with abilities, you do want Elaborate to up the soft caps as much as possible. Period. Zodiac weapons. Now this is where things get really serious, because you definitely want these regardless of where you're at in the game, unless you have like some of the best top of the line Gacha weapons. So unless you have a grid full of Gacha weapons, you will probably need these. Even me, who has spent a bit of money on the light element, still uses some of these. So keep that in mind. Now, when you unlock, it says the rank 120 raids, but I think that changes it later down the line. But when you unlock the Guardian Plus raids, and anything higher than that difficulty, they can drop purple medals. You trade those medals to get these weapons. And these are very, very good. Again, Vigor, you're going to want to have that if you plan on maintaining high HP. Rebellion, if you can survive at low HP, these will help you out a lot. And trust me, some Rebellion teams are very powerful. So I wouldn't ignore Rebellion. It's more a case of pay attention to who can do it. Because you might have something that you're sitting on that's pretty good. I have a Rebellion normal attack team. That's why I have this Rebellion staff for Dark. And they can survive very well. Again, it depends on who you pull. It depends on what you have. But you will never mix these two types together. Don't ever get Vigor with Rebellion. It is not worth it. What you can mix with them, however, is the Elaborate series, because it depends on what your ability team would be. Or if you just want some ability damage to go with whatever you're doing. So, there you go. I even use this one on light for my ability damage grid. There's like 2 of them, and I may even get a 3rd. So, there's that. And the one thing I mentioned for free-to-play fire, you would get like maybe 4 or 5 of these for fire, along with the Elaborate weapon from Guardian Raid. And it can do a lot of ability damage for fire. So yeah. malicious raid weapons. Now, these are where things get a little bit interesting because you may or may not need them, but you do have to have one of the higher tier raids in order to get these. But the main reason why you get these, you get the essential one just once, usually, just to up your heal amount, or you get the technical ones if you want some more max HP. Because when it comes to the technical weapon skill, it's honestly not that good. It can help, but it's not that good. But Technica is the normal attack weapon skill. Like, if you want to provide a little bit of a damage increase in normal attacks and all that, maybe it can help, but you mainly get either the one for healing or the one for more HP. Again, depends on what you need. Malicious Plus is where it's a little bit interesting, because first off, none of these weapons work without elemental advantage. I cannot stress that enough. Second, they don't have any effectiveness with Eidolon effects. That means if you have an Eidolon effect that says that you would like get 50% more weapon skills, these aren't effective at it. But they are flat damage increases to your normal attacks or bursts. That means it is guaranteed damage. It is guaranteed damage. So, depending on what you want or need, these can help you out. And yes, they do bypass resistances. There have been content in the game that we had where it's basically quote-unquote malicious caves, where you do these, well, they're not necessarily hard, it depends on how strong you are, but you do these fights where they try to challenge you, and you may need specific damage types or whatever, where it's like, okay, it resists bursts. Well, this doesn't care about that. It will still give you the extra burst damage. So, that's what I'm saying. Like, these can help, depending on the situation. It all depends on how crafty you are with them. You still need elemental advantage, though. But if you have a grid that's doing a really, really strong damage, you almost certainly will not have these. Like, if you happen to be one of those players that can have, like, a Hector bursting for, like, 500 million damage, you probably won't have these. Because what's a 500k going to do for 500 million? That's, like, less than 1%. Lucid weapons. Now, this is a very, very interesting one, because first off, these take a while to actually grind out, so keep that in mind. But lucid weapons have a interesting little niche, because they can have a good variety of different skill effects, but the more popular options is to get the skill effects where you either have your HP above or below a certain percent, and it will give you more final damage. Final damage is just like these, where it is just a flat damage increase, period, point blank. But it's percentage-based flat damage, and that is applied after the other ones. So, that said, it's like if you have, like my grid, where I have the Lucent Staff, anybody that likes staves is getting a 15% damage increase. And if I had something like, say, this, and it was giving me a 100,000 damage increase for every normal attack, then it became a 115,000. Because percent base goes after the normal flat amount. So, that's something to know. These, you have to really know what you're doing in order to try and make the most out of this. Just do not equip in a main slot, or you're going to turn your soul into Phantom Element, and it just won't get that much of effect, period, point blank. And more so, you can only use one of these. Don't ever try to use more than one. It won't work. But these can have some interesting niches. My suggestion, unless you really want to buff your soul's damage, consider getting, like, unless you really want to buff your soul's damage, you can get them whenever. Like Hector, of course, some people done that. But if you want to have a general use for these, like I have for my grid, I got it because I had 3 Kamihime that like stabs. So that's the point where it can actually be worthwhile. And then I managed to grind out Beethoven, who also likes stabs, so now I have 4, including the soul. So there is some niche with this. It depends on what you get, again, but this is really, really depends on what you get, because of the fact that this is where it comes back to that type matching thing. And no, my suggestion, do not put a Phantom Weapon from the Ragnarok raids with this. It's not worth it. You instead just take the Lucent and then run with whatever ultimate limit breaks you can get. But you do not have to get Lucent, even if you have characters that match. It all depends on character synergy. It depends on if you really can make the most out of it. 15% final damage actually is pretty noticeable, though. And now it's getting into some stuff that are gacha weapons. Honestly, there are some gacha weapons you can get that are technically free. It depends on where you know how to look. But for the most part, you will have to just be randomly lucky with a lot of this stuff. So, first off, Stinger. This has some noteworthy Stinger weapons right here, because I think these are some of the earlier Stinger weapons you could probably get, period point blank, for each element. It's just that the fire one doesn't have large. You do want large Stinger if you can get it. The water and the dark ones have the biggest noteworthy presence, because they are in something that is a 2017 to 2019 Miracle Ticket. It's even mentioned literally right here. Like, you either get them from the Successor's Guide, which is technically beginner missions. You can get them from Union Medals as well. I do believe Orc Event gives it too, but Orc Event's not that often. But these things can actually help out Water and Dark pretty well. If you're paying for the monthly Miracle Ticket that can go up to 2020 for Global Side, then this White Staff is there too. That's how I got a lot of those. But what the Stinger does is also give another damage multiplier, because if you have more damage multipliers, you can do more damage. It's basically straightforward. Now, you want enough in each multiplier to really up it, though. But the thing with Stinger, it's kind of like a critical hit, but only with elemental damage, or elemental advantage. So, each Stinger has its own source of going off. So, you may have a 20% chance on one, but you can have a 40% chance on another, and then it's just a different combined total if you're wanting both of them to go off. Like, for example, something that has a 50% chance and another one that has a 50% chance. You generally have a 50% chance of one going off, but then you got a 25% chance of both of them going off. Something like that. So, Stinger is a little bit complicated when it comes to weapon skills, but the payoff is very good if you can make it work. So, that said, something you probably do want to consider. Especially if you're Water or Dark element, because you will absolutely be able to have access to large Stinger. It just takes a little bit of grinding. But these are actually some very powerful stuff. And each Stinger you have that goes off adds a certain amount to the damage multiplier. When it comes to weapons, it's always 20%. So in my case, I have 40s with the light for this Shiva weapon that's shown right here. I have some setups that can guarantee them to go off. That's why you get large Stinger, because it's like 90% chance to go off with, like, say, a Catastrophe Eidolon. Just one Catastrophe Eidolon at that. So, that said, all four of them go off. I'm suddenly getting 80% the Stinger multiplier, which is a very huge damage spike. That's part of the reason why, if you've seen my video of doing Hector for a burst nuke, that's why it came up with a good 300 million damage. That's one of the reasons why. Now, granted, it's not top tier damage for Hector teams, because I don't have all the best stuff, but you can see how crazy it can kind of get. But there is another weapon skill that also has its own chance of going off, but it works a little bit differently. Stinger has every single Stinger source having its own chance. Critical, however, or Critica as they call it, or Keen, because Endgame calls it Keen. Keen will stack all the chances together to get a 50% multiplier. So that means if you have two Stinger weapons and they each have 50%, they don't stack to 100. They will instead have their own chances going off. But if you have two Keens that have total 50%, then that will stack to 100% chance, and you're guaranteed to get that 50% multiplier. It takes a lot to try and capitalize on this and Stinger, but it's something that you have to experiment with and maybe even know a little bit of math. But also keep this thing in mind as well, that when it comes to Keen, it does work, period, regardless of the fight. Stinger needs elemental advantage. Now, there are some large Keen weapons. You may or may not push them to ultimate limit break, but you usually don't have to. because there is something called versatility weapons, and they are way more powerful. So that's something to know. Now, when it comes to these technical weapons or whatever, like I said, normal attack boosts and whatnot, they kinda can help. It depends, but generally you won't end up needing them. I do have this one for set though, right here, this dark one, because it's also giving me, I do believe, Ascension. Like, I was getting Ascension from one of them somewhere. But again, you kind of don't need to chase technical damage, because when it comes to that, you usually get other damage multipliers to try and beef that damage up. It does help, it's just not high priority. Exceed, however, is, and that's also one of the rare cases where you can get extra large on something as well, because some of the Hime weapons do have extra large for Exceed. They can greatly help for your burst damage. So it depends. Same case with Elaborate. When you go for Elaborate, you up the soft cap as much as you possibly can and go for the extra large, period, point blank. It even says right here, adding Elaborate can be more effective than adding other multipliers. Because that's the thing, it is, when you go past the soft caps in this game, you lose a certain percentage of damage, and Elaborate is extremely harsh. It's the harshest loss in the game. So much that you don't go for multiple multipliers. You just do enough to get the cap, but also try to push the cap as high as possible. That's the trick to mastering Elaborate. And then when it comes to high-end, like Edison, Beethoven builds, even Medea damage as well, because she's also a thing. But you'll generally have like 6+ elaborate weapons on the grid, as well as getting like other things that hit the cap, like vigors, stuff like that. And they mentioned somebody right here that also did like damage testing for it. They're not the only one that did damage testing, but they're one of the more noteworthy ones. He's also on my Union Discord as well. Like, I even managed to test it myself. Like, when I came to doing my ability damage team setups and all of that, Elaborate, and also the Lucid weapon too, because of how I'm set up, but Elaborate mainly is how I up my damage a lot more. That team can burst, it can do normal attacks, but they're letting off so many ability damage hits that Elaborate was the way to go. If you want to focus on ability damage, you must stack Elaborate very hard, as much as you can. You still get the other skills, but you stack it as hard as you can. Vigor and Rebellion, I'm not going to go over this again because we've already done it before with the free stuff, so there you go. But this is a good idea, some of the weapons that have large. You may use them in place of the Zodiac. So there's that. Connect is an interesting thing, because what the thing with Connect is that it'll increase the burst streak. The burst streak is the extra hit that happens after you do more than one burst in a turn. What that will do is like give an extra bonus hit or whatever. They can kind of have some use with Exceed Plus stuff, but it depends, and honestly, it's only really something you chase if you have all the other multipliers. So if you happen to get something like, say, an Exceed Connect weapon, you might have some use for this. It depends. And when it comes to these weapons too, right here, these are the large versions of Exceed Plus and Tech Plus right here. Like all this from right here. Keep an eye out if you do happen to get those, because if you do the Weapon Fest banner and one of those dropped, then I would say hold on to it, because just one of them's enough to hit the flat damage soft cap. So there you go. Because yes, weapon skills themselves also have a soft cap. There's a soft cap on how much you can put, and then there's a soft cap on the damage they actually do. So yeah, wrap your head around that one. I have understood that, but even explaining it is kind of a lot. Now, composite skills, these are basically the ones that have multiple skill effects in one. These are the skill names that you really want to learn, because they can do a lot of different stuff. Even some of the free things in the game do it. Like, you can get Tri-Edge with the large vigor from the Zodiac. So, that's something to know. And what Tri-Edge is doing is Assault plus triple attack, or Barrage as its original name is. So, you get Assault plus Barrage plus Vigor. 3 things in one. There are weapons in the game that can do 4 effects, which is what these are, and that's where composite weapon skills come in. These are some of the ones you may want to pay attention to, because they can be very, very powerful, condensing a crap ton of weapon skills into a smaller space. They are very, very good. Now, not all of them are good. It depends on the weapon skills they roll. But one of the most notable ones is right here, where it's called Park Up and Fatal. We call it Park Fat for short, because that's just how some of the community is. But very, very solid one. I got 2 of this camera looking weapon right here on Wind, and I'm definitely keeping it. I even got one of these for the Thunder, so that's something to know. But a lot of these quad effect weapons right here, they're mentioned, like a good number right here. There's even some other interesting ones where it has Resilience Rampage, which is also noteworthy. Amplifier Rampage, Tactics Rampage, Park Up Flores. I have this Kaguya one too. But yeah, Park Up Flores. Then there's some that have 5 effects right here called Universal Slug. He doesn't have the picture for the fire one, but they just got it on JB's side. These are like mini versatility weapons. Universal Slug is like mini versatility weapons. So those are noteworthy to keep your eye out for as well if you happen to get those characters. Especially some of you that want some of these guys later down the line. They're very powerful. There's Harmonized Slug. Remember I mentioned the whole connect thing and all that? This is good with that because you're getting 3 multipliers, and then you get a connect for technically a 4th one for your burst, because of how burst streak works. So there you go. Harmonized Slug can also be useful for something like that. Transcend Park Up, Transcend Rampage, Magnate Slug. Pay attention to what all these do, like all the different weapon skill names and all that. That's something you have to learn on your own, but pay attention to those. It will give you a good heads up on stuff later down the line. And then look at it, the list still keeps going. The list still keeps going. I'm not going to sit here and name all of them, but you can see that the list still keeps going. There is one exception to this, and this whole Magnate Triad thing. It is considered to be technically bottom tier, but for normal attacks, it's extremely good. So I wouldn't write it off entirely. But it's something that you may, like, I wouldn't go out of my way to try and push it to ultimate limit break unless you happen to get enough copies. That's what happened with me in the Sabanya ring looking one right here. But if you get it, go ahead and use it. Because when it comes to normal attacks, these weapons actually can be pretty helpful. Like, triple attack is actually more useful than you would think. It's not high priority, but it can be more useful than you think. And then again, you still want to have technical if you can actually fit it on the grid. You still want other weapon skills more importantly, like your assaults, your vigor or rebellion, your stinger, your keen. You want those more. But if you do happen to have one of these that you can fit on the grid, I would consider it. My personal opinion. But I keep mentioning the versatility weapons. We're about to get into that because these Dragonic Eye weapons are very, very powerful and they are very, very good. Now, first off, everybody has free access to a large stinger in the game. It's just the fact that it will take 15 Dragonic Eyes, or you may get lucky off of Weapon Fest. These are still very powerful weapons because they have extra large assault, one of the rare times you do want it because it comes with large stinger. If you have any of these weapons, my suggestion is the ultimate limit break it. It's a very high priority weapon, at least with elemental advantage. But the versatility is even more high priority in my opinion because these are 6 weapon skills in one. It is disgusting. It is disgustingly good. I have some for Dark, I have 3 on Light, I have 1 on Thunder, and I plan on getting at least 2 per element. That's how good they are. At least 2 per element. But if you want to know the weapon skills, they're right here. And this is everything you get at skill level 40. All of this. And the Critica is keen, remember that. Now, there's some other ones where it's like you may get some use out of it, but it's not high priority. Like, for example, the large exceed with the extra large assault. If you happen to have it, then maybe. Because honestly, it's dependent on what else is on your grid, but it is pretty strong. It's like just not as strong as you would want it to be as other stuff. It definitely will be better than the anything you get from Union event though, so keep that in mind. And then there's the ones that need 50 Dragonic Eyes. These ones are very niche now. They are pretty useful. I have one on white. It can help you if you want to condense your grid space even a little bit further. But depending on what you pull, you may actually work your way around it and don't need these. So it's a bit of high risk if you get one. Remember, 50 Dragonic Eyes is not that much to get. For example, with that same 50 Dragonic Eyes, you can get 3 versatility weapons and still unlock an S-Class Soul. So, there you go. But the only ones you get is the Vigorous one. Do not get the Pride one. The Pride one is seriously niche. Do not ever get the Pride one. The Vigor one, however, it can boost the Vigor that everything on your grid has. And it stacks with the Eidolon effects. Remember when I said it was like a 2.25 times boost with the most Eidolons? This will give it I do believe 2.75 times for Vigor. So yeah. And then there's a few oddities as well where you might actually have these and you may use them in the early game, you may use them at a later point, who knows. But these are noteworthy where it's like this wind one for Kingu. If it's an attack or a tricky type of a Kamihime for wind, this is 30% special attack for him, or SP attack as we call it. There are weapons in the game for JP Sad, however, that will give special attack to everybody. So when that happens, this Wind Kingu one is just useless. Because why do it for specific types and for wind when you could just do it for your whole wind team? And more so, only wind had this one. The other elements now get their special attack as well later down the line. So that said, this is the oddity for right now, but later on it just falls off entirely. But these two right here, they have weapon skills that will affect everyone regardless of element. These are some of the best early game weapons in my opinion. This one on the right that looks like a claw came from a collab that GlobalSat already had, so very good chance that anybody that has this weapon may be past the point where they need it, and that collab is not coming back unless otherwise announced. But the one on the left, that one is very good for early game because it's basically a ult weapon, but works on every element. It will still turn your soul to dark element though, so remember not to put it in main slot if you don't want a dark soul. But when it comes to the weapon skills, it is like large assault and small defender. So this sword one is actually pretty useful. Well, actually I think it's medium assault, but it is a decent boost for early game because again, it's just to everyone, period, don't matter what element. It can actually save you a little bit of time trying to get the better stuff. But this other one would have been really good because this one can actually final break and it's actually stronger than the other one, the claw. So if you happen to have that, then use it until you start getting better stuff. Like I'd say the guardian weapons and all that, that's when you probably won't be using this. And then, like I said, I'm not going to go over the glossary, I'm not going to go over the appendix, but there's all this stuff right here because this video is already over already on its way to an hour. I've already covered some of the things that's mentioned here, but look at this. Like, it covers what F2P means, the limit breaks, covers damage multipliers, and you definitely want to look that up if you really want to maximize your damage, because look how crazy some of this stuff can get. But the caps, the Orichao comb, because you're going to need that to up some stuff. It's got a little appendix sheet right here. The funny thing is, I even did get shouted out here too. Go figure. But it has all this other stuff. The reason why this is unknown too is because of the fact that nobody took the time to get the info for extra large pride. You could get it from the 50 Dragonic Eye weapon, but who's going to sacrifice 50 eyes for that weapon? So, but if somebody does happen to have it, please submit it because I am a little bit curious. But you got a lot of different stuff right here where it says, okay, all these different things. Now, the reason why these Vigor and Rebellion ones stay unique is because of the fact that they do stop, they just hard stop at their limits, but the HP thresholds to be at those limits will change. I have to point that out. That's one thing I have to point that out. It's also mentioned here. Everything else will either just hard stop, or it has a soft cap where you can go a little bit past it, if not a lot past it. then this is something else that you may also want to pay attention to, the weapon skill for all the different souls, because these soul weapons do affect what they do, and only what the souls do. The only difference for the other one is that the skill 1, it will either give elemental attack to the team or HP. Skill 2 is always towards the soul alone. And when you ultimate limit break these, when you ultimate limit break the soul weapons, they get a lot of other bonus effects that are really, really worth it. That's listed right here. So keep that in mind. They even got graphs for the different damage types and all that too. But again, I'm not going over all of that because, again, that would extend this video to easily double the length at least. That's something you can check out on your own. But anyways, that's all for this. Like I said, this guide, very, very good. There's a few things I honestly would change about it because there are a few niches that do need to be pointed out, because those are cases where it's like, okay, maybe you might have the tools for it. But other than that, it does do a very good job of generally just covering everything you really need to worry about. But again, my suggestion to people, learn absolutely what these are, these weapon skill caps and all that. And then you may also want to learn what the soul weapons do, so specifically, because some of them are also very, like, noteworthy. Like, for example, everybody loves getting the Hector weapon because this is making her do extra damage when she bursts. So, there's that. But, like I said, like, very extensive guide. Probably one of the most extensive guides. I would even say it's more extensive than what I would probably do. So, that's something to know. Because I like condensing things to be a little bit more easier to understand. But if you want to know, like, the big details and mechanics behind all this stuff, this is very good for that. So, my recommendation for this guide. But anyways, that's all for this. More will come soon, because I probably will do another guide kind of using some of the stuff from this, where I go over, like, the different weapon skills and how they, like, generally combine with each other. Because I even mentioned a weapon that came out on JP side recently, and it boosts special attack. It's called a weapon skill called Rise, and it's based on max HP as well. So that's where Defender will come in. But it is very powerful, and it's the only time we had, like, special attack on weapon skills outside of that weird wind one. So that's something else to keep your eyes out for too. But that's way later down the line, and it even comes with the new raid on JP side. Yes, there's a raid above